There was a time when the internet believed Angela Simmons and Gotti were the final chapter in a long, chaotic Hollywood love story, the proof that real romance could still bloom in an industry built on illusions. People called them endgame. Fans made edits of them with soft music and heart emojis. Even the blogs, which usually live to tear couples apart, admitted that these two looked solid. But now, that dreamy storyline has exploded in front of millions, leaving behind something far darker, something Angela herself is now hinting at in a way that has the entire internet holding its breath. Because according to Angela, she truly believed she was stepping into a loving, peaceful future, a future where she would build a home with the man she thought she could trust. But instead, she found herself standing in the middle of shadows she never asked for. A world whispered about in street corners. A world where grudges end with bodies on the pavement. And for the first time, people are beginning to suspect that Angela did not walk away from a breakup, she escaped from a situation that could have taken everything from her. Now that she is safely out of that world, she has begun dropping hints that Gotti's connections were far messier and far more dangerous than anyone in the public ever realized. And that is where everything shifts. Because let's be honest, Gotti chased Angela for years. He made it his mission. Entire timelines joked that he had main character energy whenever her name was mentioned. People said Angela was the only woman he ever openly adored. So after all that public devotion, the world naturally assumed she would become the unofficial queen of Memphis, crowned in love and loyalty, riding off into the sunset with Gotti at her side. So when she suddenly announced the breakup and declared she was stepping into her single girl era, the internet froze. But the real bombshell came when she sat across from Angela Yee, trying to speak her truth without releasing details that could ruin everything. She said the breakup was not what she wanted, but it was the choice she needed. Her voice trembled. Her eyes kept drifting, as if replaying memories she desperately wished she could forget. It was the kind of interview where silence speaks louder than words, where the pauses feel like warnings. And the comments went wild. Her eyes looked scared. She is saying something without saying it. Something had to happen. This is not normal. People felt the tension through the screen. Angela kept insisting she could not share everything. That part made viewers lean in even closer. It felt like she was protecting something, or someone. And when she mentioned she had to think about her children, the energy in the room shifted. Suddenly, this was not just a breakup story. This was survival. Because we all watched Angela and Gotti publicly adore each other for years. Their chemistry was the kind that made people say, goals. So to go from that level of devotion to Angela quietly implying that being with him was dangerous? That was not a step, that was a leap off a cliff. And the deeper she spoke, the clearer it became that whatever tore them apart did not come from romance, it came from the streets. And Angela, with her public smile and private fear, might have been pulled into something she never signed up for. At first, the streets struggled to make sense of the silent storm brewing between Angela and Gotti. Everyone knew something massive had happened, but nobody could pinpoint what. And of course, the internet did what it always does, it began digging, speculating, stitching timelines together. Some people even dragged Glorilla into the conversation, because old whispers about Glow and Gotti having a secret spark refused to die. The theories exploded again when Gotti surprised Glorilla with that luxurious Cadillac Escalade IQ for her 25th birthday. The timing felt suspicious. The gift felt excessive. And the internet loves nothing more than placing dots on a board and violently connecting them. People said Angela must have felt humiliated. After all, Gotti is technically Glow's boss under his CMG label, but that has never stopped artists and executives from crossing the line into romance. Then there were the luxury watches, the designer pieces, the little gestures that did not look so little anymore. Suddenly, every clip of Gotti smiling at Glorilla became a clue. Every interaction became evidence. Social media declared that Angela had finally reached her breaking point and walked away because she could no longer tolerate the disrespect. But that theory collapsed the moment Angela spoke. Because the way she carried herself, the way her voice shifted, the way she avoided certain details, it became very clear, very quickly, that this was much bigger than infidelity. Angela had already decided she could tolerate certain flaws. She believed this man was the one. She was ready to marry him. Nobody throws away a future like that unless something darker slams its way into their life. And according to Angela, that darkness did not walk, it sprinted. She described a world spiraling out of control around Gotti because of his street ties. And this was not random guy yelling outside a club energy. This was systematic, organized, retaliatory violence on a scale Angela never imagined she would be anywhere near. She said it reached a point where every other day, someone connected to Gotti's circle was being taken out. That is when the fear set in. That is when she began to feel like she was living in someone else's nightmare. Now, Gotti has always hovered on the edges of dangerous territory, but things escalated dramatically after the murder of young Dolph. Once Dolph's supporters began pointing fingers at CMG, bodies began dropping like dominoes. The first major shock was Darian Demunii Childs, who had made a joke online about Dolph's death. It was a foolish joke, the kind people regret instantly. But in this war, jokes had consequences, and his death ignited a vicious chain reaction that grew uglier by the day. As everyone knows, young Dolph was ambushed in front of his favorite cookie shop in late 2021. It shook the entire industry. For months, supporters waited. And when Dolph's people finally moved, they did not hold back. By November 2022, Big Nusky, a rapper signed to Moneybagg Yo and cousin of Big 30, was gunned down. The streets were confused at first, but then whispers surfaced that he had connections to Straight Drop, one of the prime suspects in Dolph's murder. Then things became even more twisted. Rumors circulated that Straight Drop, Cornelius Smith, Hernandez Goven, and several others tied to Dolph's death allegedly had links to Yo Gotti, CMG, and even the infamous Memphis gang Trella Mafia. Their OG, Joshua CEO Tizzy Taylor, became a name frequently mentioned in the same breath as the case. And once a name is attached to revenge, fate tends to move quickly. By June 2023, Tizzy was gunned down, passing away before medics could even reach him. And this is the part that likely shattered Angela the most: the violence did not stop with the people involved. It bled into their families, their children, their partners, their friends. Nobody connected to these men felt safe. One of the most heartbreaking moments came in November 2022 when Hernandez Goven was arrested. But 1 month before that arrest, his daughter, Lotta Cash Desto, and her girlfriend were ambushed after leaving a party. Desto did not survive. Her death became a chilling symbol of how deep this war went and how innocent lives were becoming collateral. But the violence did not stop there. In August 2023, Memphis police reported the killing of Tammemanuel Benson, the younger brother of Black Youngsta, one of Yo Gotti's most loyal soldiers. Black Youngsta was knee-deep in the feud from the beginning. He had allegedly orchestrated the first failed attempt on Dolph's life. He never admitted whether he acted under Gotti's command, but the streets had already formed their own conclusions. And when Dolph's supporters targeted Benson rather than Youngsta himself, it became obvious that they were willing to hurt anyone they believed would cause the most emotional damage. Eventually, the vengeance escalated beyond the foot soldiers. Dolph's people began aiming directly at those they believed sat at the top of the pyramid. First, they allegedly went after Gotti's mother. She barely survived. But Gotti's brother, Big Juke, was not as fortunate. His death was devastating, but not shocking. The internet has not forgotten the countless times Big Juke mocked Dolph's murder, even posing and laughing in ways that enraged the public. There were also circulating reports that he was the one who allegedly placed a $100,000 bounty on Dolph's head. When the streets believe you initiated something, they will not rest until they finish it. By January 2024, the war that had swallowed Memphis finally claimed one of its biggest names. Big Juke, Yo Gotti's own brother, was permanently silenced in the middle of something as sacred as a family funeral. The city held its breath. No suspects. No arrests. No answers. Just a chilling reminder that this feud did not care about time, location, or tradition. It struck wherever it wished. The only thin thread of hope was the belief that Juke's death had completed the deadly circle, that Dolph's camp had delivered the final blow and, at last, the cycle of retaliation would settle into silence. But that silence came after 3 years of catastrophic bloodshed that reshaped Memphis in ways no one could have predicted. What makes the entire situation even more tragic is that none of this needed to happen. That tidal wave of destruction could have been avoided if Yo Gotti had simply let his pride take the loss in peace and accepted that young Dolph did not want to sign to CMG or be associated with him in any capacity. On the surface, Gotti pretended it was no big deal, the type of calm dismissal people adopt when the cameras are rolling and they want to appear unbothered. But behind the polished smiles, behind the luxury cars and choreographed interviews, there was an irritation that never fully disappeared. Dolph represented something Gotti could not control. And for certain men, especially powerful men, lack of control feels like humiliation. People forget how admiration and resentment can grow from the same root. Gotti admired Dolph at first. Dolph was magnetic. He had that raw, stubborn, fearless energy that cities latch onto. He was independent long before independence became a trend. He created his own label, made his own money, moved on his own terms, and he never begged anyone for validation. But the moment he stood firm and refused CMG's offer, that admiration warped into something uglier. Every refusal felt personal. Every success Dolph achieved on his own felt like a challenge. Respect mutated into rivalry, and rivalry turned into a wound that pride would not allow to heal. Soon, small interactions became fuel for larger conflicts. A stray line in a song. A vague post online. A side comment in an interview. Fans reading into everything. Bloggers stirring drama. Crews whispering about who said what and who refused what. What began as disagreements between two artists eventually expanded into a full-blown war because neither side wanted to appear weak. And in the music industry, where ego is everything and reputation is currency, appearing weak can be more dangerous than any bullet. The saddest part is that Dolph never wanted a war. All he ever wanted was space. Space to create. Space to build PRE. Space to be his own boss. Space to exist without someone else trying to steer his destiny. But the moment he showed he would not bow, the moment he claimed his independence loudly and proudly, that choice triggered a series of events he could never undo. People started picking sides. Affiliations hardened. The argument stopped being about business and became about dominance. In their eyes, Dolph's only crime was staying true to himself. But for people with fragile egos and dangerous connections, that is the greatest disrespect imaginable. Then the violence escalated. Shots fired at his SUV. Threats handled online like casual banter. Rumors everywhere. Bodies falling in neighborhoods that had absolutely nothing to do with music. Fans prayed this would blow over. They hoped maturity, money, or time would heal the wound. But grudges do not die easily, especially when they involve power, loyalty, and the streets. And just when it seemed like the city was recovering from Dolph's tragic murder, when it seemed like the flames were finally cooling, the drama came roaring back with the intensity of a revival fire. Not quiet. Not subtle. Loud. Chaotic. Painful. Because the way the young Dolph trial has been unfolding, it is becoming clear that the book on this feud was never truly closed. People started side-eyeing everything. They questioned what was overlooked. They wondered what was hidden. They asked why certain names were never spoken in courtrooms despite years of rumors tying them to the conflict. Most people already knew the list of suspects connected to the case, but the real shock struck when Hernandez Goven, one of the men charged with Dolph's murder, was found not guilty of conspiracy and first-degree murder. The verdict hit Memphis like an explosion. Relief for some. Rage for others. Confusion for nearly everyone. But the universal reaction? This story had deeper layers that no one had dared to peel back. Goven's lawyers did not tiptoe around the truth. They tore into the investigation with a level of boldness that left the courtroom buzzing. One of their biggest arguments was the sheer fact that police never attempted to interview Yo Gotti or Big Juke, despite the entire city knowing about the long, documented, public feud between CMG and Dolph. They called out law enforcement directly, accusing them of ignoring huge pieces of the puzzle because certain names carried too much power, too much money, too much influence. According to the defense, targeting Goven was easy. He did not have a multi-million-dollar machine behind him. He did not have corporate protection or an army of attorneys. In their words, he was a pawn in a deadly game controlled by players far bigger than him. Imagine sitting in a courtroom while your lawyer calmly exposes a truth so unsettling that the entire building goes silent. Imagine hearing that the police never once bothered to interview the people whose beef with young Dolph was known across the entire nation. Imagine realizing that investigators did not even ask the most basic routine questions to individuals who had publicly argued with the man now lying dead. That moment alone shook the foundation of the trial. The defense continued hammering that point. If justice had truly been the goal, then every corner would have been inspected, every rumor interrogated, every name in the narrative pulled into the light. Instead, the investigation felt selective, almost hand-picked, as if the authorities rushed to close the case rather than unravel the deeper truth. Whispers spread through the courtroom like smoke, and outside, Memphis whispered even louder. People asked the questions law enforcement refused to ask. Was the justice system afraid? Was someone shielding someone? Or was the entire investigation simply conducted with an incompetence that bordered on negligence? Nobody had answers, but the doubt sank its roots into the city. And once doubt settles, it does not fade. It grows. It spreads. It begins to rot everything people believed they understood about Dolph's death. And while Hernandez Goven walked out with a not guilty verdict, his attorneys made it painfully clear that Yo Gotti and Big Juke were not harmless names floating in the background. They were part of the history, the arguments, the threats, the songs, the rumors, the years of tension between CMG and Dolph. Whether they were involved in the murder was never proven, maybe never will be, but the true outrage came from the revelation that law enforcement had not even attempted to verify those possibilities. A gap that wide in an investigation is more than an oversight, it is a void. A blind spot large enough to swallow the truth whole. Some people believe this verdict opens new doors. Others think it will bring fresh investigators, new eyes on old evidence. And a growing number fear it will reignite a feud that was never truly laid to rest. Because when one suspect walks free, someone else becomes the focus. Someone else steps into the spotlight. Someone else becomes the question mark. In this case, that someone is a man who believed he had escaped the shadows of his past. But those shadows are rising again, being dragged back into the daylight, and the entire city is watching. Even more disturbing is the way fans and residents are connecting dots that maybe should remain separate, but at the same time look far too intentional to ignore. They remember the interviews. They remember the controversies. They remember Dolph surviving multiple attempts on his life. They remember the subliminal messages in songs. They remember each time Dolph stood tall and how, right after that, something violent followed. Now they wonder if the justice system chose convenience over truth when certain powerful names emerged. Meanwhile, Gotti has remained silent. And silence is a language of its own. Silence can mean strategy. Silence can mean fear. Silence can mean guilt. Silence can mean nothing at all. People interpret it however they need to. But the streets? The streets interpret silence with a different vocabulary. The streets never forget. The streets never stop talking. And now, with the trial dragging old memories and old accusations back into the light, Memphis feels like a wire pulled too tight, one spark away from snapping. And now the world waits. Some expect new charges. Some expect new suspects. Some think the entire case is going to collapse. But one thing is certain, this trial did not end the story, it cracked it wide open. It forced everyone to look backward and question which names were ignored, which connections were brushed aside, and who might have been sacrificed in the process. What happens next is unpredictable. Maybe the storm dies here. Maybe it turns into a hurricane. But when a man's murder leaves this much noise behind, the truth usually resurfaces, no matter how deep someone tried to bury it. And if even a fraction of what Goven's defense hinted at is real, the storm surrounding young Dolph's death is not ending. It is just beginning to gain its true strength. That argument worked, and Goven walked free. But prosecutors were humiliated on a national stage. They could not walk away from the case without at least pretending to dig deeper into CMG and Gotti. And allegedly, the deeper they dug, the more disturbing the puzzle became. What began as a simple courtroom clash has now turned into a sprawling web of hidden loyalties, secret meetings, unexplained movements, and panicked whispers coming from people inside the camp. Something is not adding up. Something is unraveling. The streets can feel the shift in energy, the caution, the surveillance, the sudden silence when certain names get mentioned. Every day brings a new rumor, another leak, another anonymous tip that lands exactly where it should not. And the deeper investigators go, the more threads they find leading toward the same direction, threads that were never supposed to surface. According to Angela, the truth goes even deeper. Deeper than street politics. Deeper than music industry power plays. Deeper than petty jealousy or old beef. She claims there is an entire underground network of alliances, grudges, and betrayals operating behind every headline. The public only sees glimpses, mugshots, news clips, half-baked statements. But Angela has seen the real machinery from up close. She watched how Gotti moves when something dangerous is coming. And she knows that when he goes silent, when he begins distancing himself, when he hides behind calm smiles, something